Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Cavallaro, Industry Development Manager for Food and Agri, and I'm also the facilitator for Meet the Chef Collective today. I acknowledge traditional owners of the land we meet, and I acknowledge our elders past and present. Welcome to today's session and welcome to the Brisbane Economic Development Agency. Brisbane EDA is our City Economic Development Board, and we exist to grow Brisbane's economy, drive demand for the city and create industry growth and trade opportunities for local businesses. We've been supporting Brisbane's priority sectors to sail and grow for several years, and by doing so, creating new jobs, retaining existing jobs and attracting new capital and filling supply gaps in the Brisbane economy. Moving forwards, Brisbane EDA will be supporting local businesses to continue to recover and scale with the aim of retaining businesses and jobs in Brisbane. We also to continue our signature programs such as the Future Food Initiative. This is a specialist sector-specific investment in the food and beverage industry, and it's helped more than 2,000 local businesses generate over $75 million of economic impact to the Brisbane's economy. Now, Brisbane EDA, with the support of key stakeholders and partners, are mapping the key shifts in consumer behaviour and ensuring that we have a really good understanding of what is impacting our priority sectors. Specifically, whilst the online delivery market in Australia was tracking a year-on-year increase, it has been the standout behaviour in response to COVID-19. In Brisbane, like many global cities, we saw an immediate, and we do now continue to see an accelerated adoption of online ordering and delivery. During lockdown, online ordering and delivery was a critical lifeline for hospitality, enabling our local restaurants and cafes to significantly be able to navigate the disruption to the traditional supply chain. But we do acknowledge it really did force a lot of businesses a very quick digital transition. Specifically, some of these companies were actually not ready to be online. And with that, we're obviously looking to work with you to ensure that your capability is improved. To ensure future stability, businesses have to find new markets and new customers and reach them in new and improved ways. And this has been important not just during lockdown, but it's going to be continually critical to our recovery and growth. The past 12 months have highlighted the importance of getting products to consumers efficiently, affordably and sustainably. Consumer behaviours have changed and now taken root, and our business models need to shift and flex in response. Smart kitchens are a new operational model to reach new customers efficiently, affordably and sustainably. And importantly, they have scope for both established hospitality players and new food entrants. Our team at Brisbane EDA are here to help you navigate the changes to our economy and find a way forward. Today's Meet Chef Collective program is a fantastic example of how we provide local businesses the opportunity to see the trends and insights and have a direct connection on the opportunity on how you can grow your business through Chef Collective Smart Kitchens. Today I'm joined by Mark Heath, launcher of Chef Collective, who will provide you the key insights and the ways to optimise on these trends, also stepping you through the details of the Smart Kitchen and outlining the Chef Collective offering. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Lisa. I'd like to take a moment as well to also thank Brisbane EDA for all their help, not only in getting set up here in Queensland, but running great initiatives like this one. What I'd like to take you through today is not only some insights we're seeing in the market here in Brisbane, the future growth opportunities we see in Brisbane, and a few tips and tricks on adapting to a digital storefront in online food delivery, but also our offering as a smart kitchen and how it fits into that network, that fabric of providing great food to hungry customers, no matter where they are. So I've got a brief agenda here today, but I'll be walking you through a few slides. Essentially what these are takeaways or key messages that we've found helpful for the clients that we work with that come into our space, or generally in the industry who want to understand a little bit more about engaging with customers in a digital first way. So I want to start off with the landscape that we're operating in today, Brisbane. Now, it's easy to differentiate Brisbane from places like Los Angeles or New York or potentially London, in that we think of an Australian microcosm that food delivery or online services aren't as big of a thing as they are in these locations. The thing is, if we look at food delivery and we look at the development of that industry in Australia over the past few years and the future forecasts of that industry within Australia, The growth rate is astounding. Now, the numbers I've got on the screen here are from a Morgan Stanley report, and they're actually pre-COVID. These are before the effects of the pandemic have taken hold. And of course, everybody in the hospitality industry, or even tangentially related to it, knows that COVID has spurred this trend even further. It's made the growth even bigger. But pre-COVID, we were seeing a 16% year-on-year growth rate of food delivery here in Australia. Now, what's important about that double-digit growth rate is that there are some parts of Australia that are growing far quicker than others, and Brisbane is one of those places. We're seeing order levels in Brisbane, especially around the core areas of Coorparoo and the Fortitude Valley, grow at an exceedingly fast rate year on year, and it's picking up. Now, this is in part due to, of course, the engagement by restaurants, that are on platforms like Uber Eats, Deliveroo, or even their own websites that are delivering orders. But it is also on part and mostly driven by really hungry customers that have made a choice to access their food through online platforms. Now, I mentioned COVID and I mentioned the pandemic and how that adapts and changes the way this industry grows. And I also mentioned that has led to an increased or accelerated growth rate, especially in places like Brisbane. Now, the important thing to take away from that is what we're seeing in the reversal of lockdowns, the reversal and sort of coming out of that initial shock of the pandemic. In some ways, we expected the growth in food delivery to taper back a little bit as regular dining opened up and people started to go into their traditional restaurants. What we've actually seen is that has held up. People have chosen almost permanently to consume food in a digital first way in a lot of the instances that both occurred within COVID, but also outside of it in normal life. So what I mean by that is it is now normalized on a Friday night to have your pizza in, or your Chinese or your Thai delivered to your doorstep. This hasn't taken away, of course, from going and dining in those restaurants. We've seen an amazing uptake of people flocking back to restaurants for an in-person dining experience. But of course, we've seen that delivery convenience. It's something that is stuck in consumers' minds. It's a trend that is here to stay, and quite frankly, it's not a trend any longer. Now, I mentioned a little earlier about Brisbane on sort of the world stage. It's very easy to think about online delivery, internet-based services, these being a big thing in places like London and New York. Importantly, however, Australians are more and more choosing to pay for the convenience of that delivery to their door. The interesting thing to do is to look at the Brisbane market, for example, in its segments and compare it to places overseas. On this site, on this slide that I'm showing on the screen right now, I've taken the core area of Brisbane around the CBD, and I've compared it to major capital cities overseas, your Los Angeles, your Paris, your London. These are incredibly dense markets. They are places where food delivery has skyrocketed in the past and continues to do so. It is one of the dominant forms that consumers engage with food that they love. The important thing to take away is that Brisbane, especially in some of the key pockets of core Brisbane, is on that world stage. It is on par with places like Los Angeles with regards to its income and population density. Now, this is an important realization. It's an important factor because what it does is it sets the stage for Brisbane to be a place that will turn into the amount of food delivery that we're having in those other locations. So the proportion of a customer's basket that they would dedicate to food consumption outside of grocery is vastly bigger in those locations than it is in places like Australia. And that's the trend that we're seeing. We're going towards that large proportion and we're seeing it accelerate. People are getting to a lot of food delivery really quickly. Now, importantly, there's also the income side of this. Brisbane has very similar population density to places in the US, for example, but a household income of 10 to 20% higher, in some cases even higher than that. And what that means is we know that order volume is going up and we know it should approach a share of basket to be somewhat similar to those places. But we also know that that basket size is big and it's really big compared to those other locations on the world stage, like in your New Yorks and your Los Angeles. Now, what this means is opportunity, and that's kind of a twofold thing. Number one, it's continuing to engage with customers through food delivery apps and other tech-enabled models. And number two, it's leaning into this trend of consumers consuming their food digitally first. I'll get to what I mean by that in just a second. Before I do, I want to just dive a little bit more into the characteristics of Brisbane that for us made it such an attractive place to come and set up our business. But in addition, really highlights the opportunity that remains in the market. So I've got a couple of pretty crazy looking maps on the screen at the moment, and I want to walk you through each one of them. The first on the left is population density. Now, we define this by the amount of people that are in a certain area. And we've cut up the city into a bunch of blocks, and the more red an area is on that map, the more people who live there. That population density, in addition to income density, which is in the middle map, they're pretty similar. Now, what's important is mapping these two pieces, so where people with quite high disposable income are living in large amounts, alongside restaurant locations, which I've got over on the right there. Now, importantly, in places like the CBD, we know restaurants are very well located. They're very convenient, very easy to get to. If you're having a lunch break, it's great to go down to your local sushi place and pick up an order. But outside of those core areas, where you still have a lot of people and a lot of disposable income, what we're seeing is that restaurants have naturally sort of congregated in retail strips. And these might be areas where you've got 3 or 4 restaurants in a line on a bit of a high street. It might be a small sort of supermarket-esque area where you've got 4 restaurants and dry cleaners or other services. The point is that these restaurants aren't as convenient as the ones in the CBD for the people that are living there. There is a physical gap, a geographic gap between the people that are living in those areas with high incomes, very high density, and where their favorite restaurants are located. And it is that gap that is plugged by online food delivery, and it is that gap that is not yet fully plugged by that market. And what we're seeing is a shift to delivery for those customers. That's how they're engaging with these restaurants. And it is not by any means a takeaway from them going and experiencing that restaurant in person, but on a rainy Friday night, for example, it is more and more becoming the default choice for consumers. Now, the interesting thing about operating in this space as a food provider, maybe you're in the hospitality industry, is thinking about the business of providing food for online delivery in the same way you would a traditional business. Now, to take a step back for a second and think about the traditional business that restaurants usually operate in, they have a ton of amazing things that they have to do all at once, seamlessly, perfect. From the moment somebody walks in to be seated at their table, taking the correct order, relaying it to the kitchen, it getting made, coming out. They've got an experience to look after for the customer. They have to make sure that they're managing the production line in the kitchen. Everything that's going on, it's incredibly complex. Now, the level of intensity of planning, of thought, of optimization that goes into those processes, goes into how the customer feels when they walk in the door, or how the customer feels when they observe the menu and they order. That level of care and dedication is the same level that really needs to be applied to online food delivery storefronts. Now, we work with quite a few clients that are either experts in the field of delivering food. They have a very successful online presence. And we work with a lot of clients that are doing this for the first time. And one of the analogies that we find really, really works, that we try to transfer between clients in our facilities, is the idea of thinking about your listings on food delivery apps like Deliveroo or Uber Eats as these storefronts. It might be physical, it might be a sort of an imaginary shelf, for example, where people are picking from. But the thought here is to think about how you would optimize your storefront to be able to entice a customer to not only order, but to order again. And that brings me to this analogy. Now, this one's was actually shared to us by one of the clients in our building here in Brisbane, and we absolutely love it. Think of a normal supermarket shelf. Now, there are a ton of different milks at this point, and not all of them come from animals, of course, and it gets quite confusing for the consumer to really know what they want. They've got a ton of choices. The slide that I'm showing you now is representative of a normal supermarket sort of dairy aisle or shelf. Now, the important thing here is the sort of economics or the thought process around the positioning of your product on that shelf. And what research tells us is that 70% of the products that are purchased are sitting in that middle area. They're easy to grab, they're colourful, they're easy to see at all heights, and they are most often the ones that end up in the shopping trolley. Likewise, down below, 20%, we see most that 20% of the sales coming from below that sort of centre area. And this is reliant on, you might have your heavier goods down there. Some operators and some providers of these products are happy to be in that space. That's where they play well. But likewise, up the top, that's where about 10% of the products get sold. The point here is this: it's finding your product's niche, what it's good at, and listing it in a place where consumers are going to be able to find it, engage with it, and be able to order from it in the case of our digital storefronts. The thought is to be an analogy to the milk brands, for example, that are on the slide. Almond Breeze have spent a long time trying to get into that centre section, and that's they've got a whole corporate department built around being able to get themselves onto that piece in these shelves on these supermarkets. That's the exact attitude we need to take to your online listings. This is where we kind of step out of the analogy for a bit and into the listings that are on the applications. Now, just to clarify, what I mean by applications here are Uber Eats and Deliveroo, DoorDash, Menulog, etc. But they could also mean any other listing of your business online where a customer might find you and might order from you. This could be Google as well. Now, very interestingly, customers in the world of digital delivery, they do think very similar to those that are in the grocery store. In my previous example, I had the middle shelf. It's the easy to reach one. It's the one you want to be on. And that's because customers have got a pretty short attention span. They're not looking in the far left corner or down the bottom right. They're looking in the middle. They're grabbing the thing that is near their hand. The same goes for these delivery apps. In this case, instead of being in the middle shelf, you want to be up the top of the app in the ranking. Now, this kind of comes in a couple of forms. First is, of course, being at the top of the app as soon as it's opened. That might be in a promotional carousel. It might be in the top ranking in your area. But the second is when a customer searches for a key term, might be wings, for example, getting up the top of that list when a customer searches for a food type. And the analogy to draw back to the supermarket here is really this. And one, it's great to be in the front of the supermarket. Great to be right in the eye line, right at the front window. But if you can't be up there, think about which aisle you're in and try to be in the prime position of that aisle. To the milk analogy, be Almond Breeze in the middle of the shelf. Now, what I've got here on the slide is a sort of a representation of customer drop-off as they go through different listings on apps. Now, this is no one application by any means, and it's an illustrative example, but the point stands. If you are ranked somewhere between 1 to 5, and you can think of this if you open your Uber Eats or Deliveroo app as the restaurants that come up straight away, you've got the majority, almost 100% of the eyeballs that open the app and have a look at it, seeing your brand, seeing your product. You are, in that case, the Almond Breeze in the middle of the shelf. Very quickly, however, we get customers dropping off. What this means is if you're between, say, rank number 5 and somewhere between there and number 15, you might lose up to half of the customers that are looking and opening that app, that have decided they're hungry, they want to order some food. You're losing their eyeballs altogether. And this stands not only for being on the front page, but also in your specific category. Even further down the rank, even less likely someone's going to find you. To put this in context of an actual ranking, and this is not from any one of the apps that are here in Australia, but what this means is you want to be in the top left. That's our middle shelf. That's our being in the supermarket, the easily grabbable and reachable area. As we move to the right and we move downwards down the list, that's when you start losing customers. Now, you might be thinking, I don't control the listing. If I could be up the top, I would, of course. Why wouldn't everybody be? But what we try to do here is to think about the types of things that get us up to the top. You know, the algorithms that each of the apps run, the things that will make customers order and ultimately end up pushing you up the rankings and serving your product first when somebody searches for a term related to your restaurant. So what might these things be? One of the key pieces, of course, is promotions. And that's something that we work with our clients on very consistently. Everybody wants to know what the most efficient promotion is to get themselves up the top ranking in the app. It might be into a carousel. It might be offering free delivery or cheaper delivery. Maybe it might be $5 off an order, for example. That's one way of doing it. But there's a few other things that are much cheaper and definitely better for the customer experience as well, that we help our clients through. One of those is working on the speed of getting an order to a courier, and that courier getting an accurate order, making sure it's the right one that they're taking and that all of the order is there, and taking it to the customer. Now, that might feel a little bit amorphous, might feel intangible, but I'm going to take you through this a little bit later on. This is something that we can categorize, we can quantify, and we can work on to ensure we're getting food out quicker than anybody else. When somebody is hungry and they search wings, you're up the top because you're the quickest. There are a few other pieces that flow into this, and I'm going to take you through those now. So the important thing, to bring it back to this analogy, and actually I might use a different one here. If you were running a store selling widgets on the high street, there isn't a situation where you wouldn't spend a lot of time thinking how your storefront feels to people walking by. If somebody was after widgets, you'd want to make sure that they can see you sell widgets, that they can see each of the pieces that you sell and all the different types. Importantly, what you wouldn't be doing is, taking newspaper and covering up half the storefront. You wouldn't be leaving half your widgets that you sell off the board out the front that tells them what you sell. So this is one of the first places that we start. That analogy for us in the restaurant space on these applications is the menu. Now, this might seem pretty simplistic. It might feel, I've got a menu. I've developed it. I know how it flows. It works well in my restaurant. Why wouldn't it work the exact same way on delivery? The thing is, we've done a lot of research with customers. We've spent a lot of time understanding the types of decisions that people are making when they are ordering through online delivery apps. The first, and this is not always crazy obvious, but the first is, they're often on their mobile phone. And you've got to make sure your menu is optimized to be read on a mobile phone. If you take that analogy of my menu is great in my restaurant, often it can have descriptions that are up to a sentence long, and that description doesn't transfer over into a place in the digital world on a mobile. Now, you've also got to consider there's plenty of different mobile phone models out there. There's different screens that people are reading these on, different reading levels and levels of engagement. In addition to the fact that the majority of people that are looking at menus, or they're at the point of seeing your storefront, they've already made the decision to eat. Now they're kind of choosing just where to do it. So you're not trying to get the message across, hey, you should eat now, in the same way that you would potentially trying to bring people into your storefront on the high street. You're trying to get the message across that, hey, if you order from me, your meal is going to be great. It's going to be what you expect, and it's going to fill you up, for example. So menus, back to this point. This is your storefront. This is somebody's walked into your store. What's the first thing they see? Now, you wouldn't want half your shelves covered over and you wouldn't want no prices and people to be picking up boxes with big question marks on them as to what's inside. You would be looking for neatly displayed items, very clear as to what people are buying, and to make sure that people understand, you know, if I buy this product, oh, I can get this deal over here, for example. So for us, we comb through menus. This is the most important piece. Everything from spelling mistakes to very, very clearly itemizing each piece on the menu to ensure that people can easily identify what they're ordering. You know, they can make their own price and value sort of decisions with each of those items. And of course, they can communicate clearly to a group they might be ordering with. There are a non-insignificant amount of orders that get dropped from restaurants because people in a group can't clearly communicate, I want X, I want Y, and I want to put it all into one order. These things, working through them, can really ramp your sales. If you've got somebody in your store, you need to sell them. So, a couple of examples. The first and very, very obvious one is photos. Now, photos, it sounds like, you know, I don't have a photo on my menu in my restaurant. Why should I have to worry about it on the app? The reality is everybody else is spending a lot of time on preparing and positioning their products through photos to catch the eye of the consumer. Now, there's not only from a catch eye point of view, you know, those hero shots that say, wow, this product looks really cool, it looks really good, fresh or healthy or hearty, whatever you're going for. It's also a way to deploy information. So, for example, I'm ordering Thai. I'm looking for the photos that show me that I'm getting X portion. You know, it's a portion that I'm after. Maybe that's because I'm really hungry and I'm after a big portion. Maybe it's I'm going for a shared meal and I need to figure out how many pad thais that I'm ordering. The point of photos is twofold. One, to capture attention. The second is to ensure that you are transmitting that information and you're setting expectations. So, bringing it back to our restaurant. Everybody's had that moment when they're sitting in a restaurant, they're looking at the menu and they're deciding what to order. I've done it myself. I sneak a peek at the restaurant tables nearby. And I have a look and I say, yeah, okay, the squid looks pretty good. Yeah, it's a pretty big portion. Maybe we'll only get one of them. That is the exact thing you're trying to capture and you're trying to put onto your digital menu. Those feelings of assuredness, yeah, this meal's going to be good. Those feelings of, I know what I'm going to get. My expectations have been set. And then all you have to do at that point is to meet them. Now, this brings me to my next piece. You've got a great photo. Your pad thai is looking brilliant. The next piece is about describing what that food is, right? You've got your clean photo. Now you need to make the consumer understand what exactly is in that dish. Now, there's a couple of ways you can go about this. One of the ways that we see are quite popular, although not quite optimized, is to list every variation of that dish. So, for example, you might have a chicken pad thai, or maybe it's got beef in it, whatever it might be. You list each variety of that dish. So it gives the consumer a bit of an idea of what's going on, sets those expectations. The thing we find is more optimal is keeping that menu shorter, keeping it cleaner, and keeping it centered around sort of categories. So if I take a curry, for example, I might have a particular type of curry. And instead of listing it 3 times for the 3 different proteins that would live in that curry, I would add those proteins as modifiers. Now, modifiers is a whole topic on its own, and maybe we'll get back here to do a modifier webinar. But essentially, this is your ticket to hand control and hand expectation setting over to the consumer. This is where you say, hey, here's the base dish. Here's the carbohydrates that might go into it, or maybe it's a salad base, whatever it is. And then you hand, within a bound, you hand control over to the consumer. This does a couple of things. One, it keeps your main menu clean, right? You haven't got 5 different types of the same curry listed. You've just got one. 2, it reassures the consumer, yeah, I'm vegetarian. I know that I'm going to get a vegetarian curry. I know there's no hidden beef floating around there, for example. 3, it allows the consumer another opportunity to spend again. This is really important. If you're making a product that can be modified, a pizza, for example, they've been doing this for years, allowing the consumer the opportunity to add extra meat, or maybe they're going to double the stuffing in the crust, or whatever it might be. It works to allow the consumer to bump up their basket size. And we see this all the time. We've got operators in our facility at the moment who they do a dessert. It's a fantastic dessert as they make it. But we've seen consumers add a ton of toppings, and I'm talking a literal ton. It's more than the base of the dessert that there originally was. And the point is that takes that dessert from, say, $16 up to, say, $25. But it's the consumer's choice. The consumer has made that choice, and they've set their own expectations. And because the product is amazing as it is, they're going to get a pretty incredible meal. So just to recap there, you've nailed your photos. You're working on a very clean, easy to read menu. No one's scrolling for a couple of hours to get through your menu. And you've really spent that time to add in the modifiers to each of those menu items, giving the consumer choice and the ability to set their own expectations, but also providing just that little bit more of information, comfort. You've got to remember, through the consumer's eyes, it's a Friday night, they're a little bit wet, they're tired, they just want to order some food. And for them to take a bet on a new dish or a new restaurant, whatever it might be, they need to feel comfort that if they wait the 30 minutes for it to turn up at their door, it's going to be as they expect. That's the key to success. Cool. So there's plenty to talk through on sort of optimizing your storefront, where it sits in those rankings, where it comes through and optimizing that basket size coming out of the menu. But I want to take a second here to talk about the storefront itself. Now, the key to online food delivery is this separation of your store, your brand, how you'd like to think about it, and a physical presence. Now, that sounds a bit wishy-washy at the start, but importantly, it's actually an opportunity to kind of think outside the bounds of how you engage with your customer. To dive right in, a very simple way to do this is to add virtual brands to your restaurant listing. So, for example, you might run a pizza chain and you're listed on Uber Eats or DoorDash, right? And your brand, Mark's Pizza, is listed on DoorDash, and it's got great menu, great modifiers. People can go in there and they can build up a vegetarian pizza, fantastic meat lovers, and it can all come in the one order. Now, that is fantastic, and you're nailing it. You might think, how do I do a virtual brand from that? How would I possibly double my exposure on these storefronts? Well, you might say, great, I've got Mark's Pizza as a brand. I'm going to set up Lisa's Pizza as well. Now, in your actual store, in your kitchen, none of the operations really change. You're still making essentially the same pizzas, but they're coming from a separate order flow. Now, the question then arises, why would I double my pizza? Aren't I competing with myself? And this is where we start to get into how the consumer thinks. So if I take you to that rainy Friday night, and the consumer's sitting down, they're pulled out their phone and they're about to order. If they are looking for, say, vegetarian meals or vegan pizza or whatever specific thing they might be looking for, they're looking for it in that level of granular detail. Often, the consumer's choice starts with, I feel like pizza. But very rapidly does that become, I feel like pizza, it needs to be vegetarian. I feel like wings, I'm looking for Korean fried. I'm not looking for buffalo, for example. Once the consumer has made the choice of the category that they're eating in, they get pretty specific pretty quickly. And this is actually your opportunity. So you've got Mark's Pizza, nails great pizzas, and people come to it and they flock to it, they love it. But what if you've got somebody searching for vegetarian? It's the easiest example. Or potentially keto is another trend that's coming up. They're not searching for pizza. They're not starting there. The reason for that is that they're used to pizza menus being predominantly meat-based and potentially a couple options down right at the bottom that cater to them. Or potentially they have to mess around adding notes saying, hey, please don't put bacon on this, or please use a vegan cheese. What you can do, you already offer this product. Mark's Pizza already makes those products special to order, but you can take each of those, create them, and put them on a separate brand. So maybe it's Mark's Vegan Pizza or Mark's Vegetarian Pizza. And when that person goes to order and they're searching for vegetarian food products, a specialist vegetarian store or vegan store pops up. And this is really, really interesting. What this means is this consumer has found something that is created just for them, perfectly for them. Wow, I'm vegan. I can't believe somebody started a vegan brand. That's great. It gives the chance for that consumer to order, makes that possibility, that probability much higher, because they've found something that they can trust, and they say, I'm definitely not getting some random bits of bacon on this pizza. Like this one's built for me. And you can do this quite a few times over. So the point here is kind of twofold. One is you've catered more specifically to your consumer without compromising on your original brand. And two, you've been able to do that without really disrupting the operations in your kitchen. From the consumer's perspective, they're ordering from a specialist. From your perspective, you're getting more orders just from a different channel. Now, I've kind of skipped ahead here a little bit. My pizza slide is actually here. But there are some guys coming out of the US that have done this to an exceptional level. It's a pizza store over there that runs 8 different brands out of one kitchen. They've got everything from cauliflower-based, stuffed pizza. They've made a full thin-based line. I mentioned before, keto. They make things out of wacky almond meal, etc. And they've done all of this without taking the brand that they had, their original brand that people know and love, and changing that in any way. People can still engage with that brand. Now, just to flip back for a second here, you might be wondering, okay, I kind of get this. I get it from a pizza store. Sure, I can split up into those different ways of doing it. And fine, I do Thai. I'm going to have a vegetarian focused Thai brand, or I might do a really spicy version, whatever it might be. I get it, but what if I don't want to go too crazy with this? It brings back to simplifying and taking an extended menu and splitting it into parts. So this is sort of another way to do secondary brands. What you might do is you might take your Thai menu and say, great, I'm going to take my pad Thai and I'm going to riff on my pad Thai. I'm going to make a full brand dedicated to that product. And I'm going to make that brand centered around adjusting that dish to all different styles. It's going to be 4 or 5 different styles, and it's going to have 4 or 5 different products, and that is my brand. Now, of course, that's just part of your original menu, but you've encapsulated all those options and you've popped them in one place. So when somebody, of course, searches for pad Thai, for example, they're going to come up with your brand. Likewise, you might take noodles or your rice base and split them into a secondary brand as well. Once again, part of your original menu, just splitting it into 2 or 3. Each of these tricks kind of feeds back into that original learning. Simplify your menu, make it easy to find, make it easy to engage with, and give the consumer the ability to engage with you in a really granular way. The easy way to think about this is no longer is the consumer bound by what they see around them. They're no longer bound by the restaurant across the road or in the food court. They now have hundreds of options. So the way to stand out in the sea of hundreds of options around them is to be specifically what they're looking for. Now, of course, you can't guess that. That's really, really hard to do. But what you have on your side is the ability to spin up almost infinite of these brands. Get really specific, figure out different target markets, and cater specifically for them. You can be everything to everybody without significantly changing your operations. Cool. So I want to take a moment here and talk about smart kitchens. Now, Chef Collective, we launched in Brisbane a couple of weeks ago. This is our business. We provide smart kitchens, and I'm going to take you through those in just a second. But essentially, we like to see ourselves as the interface between the consumer making their decisions to eat on a rainy Friday night, that digital transaction with the food platform, and you cooking it and getting it to the customer. So I'm just going to go through a little example that we've found is really helpful in explaining what we do. So the first piece we start off with is a disseminated look at how the food industry is structured today. And that's what's on the slide now, a bit of a representation. This is how restaurants are currently distributed. So they're built in neighborhood retail strips, you can see it on the screen. They're centered around areas like the CBD. They're centered around areas with high foot traffic, for example. Now, we've also got green dots. What are the green dots? These are the couriers that take that food from each of those restaurants and get it to the customer. Now, it might look like a bit of a jumbled mess on there, but right now, it's pretty good. It works pretty well. It means that a driver is typically at your door as a restaurant within about 15 minutes, and they're at the door of the customer in usually another 15. The thing is, that driver is then driving to the next restaurant, and they might take 20 because they're coming from the customer's location, for example. The point is, it's a bit of an unorganized mess right now, and restaurants haven't been built to facilitate that delivery in a really efficient way. So for the food delivery market, or online food delivery, this is what we see as the future. We see brands that are virtual. We see brands that are already existing in physical spaces, amalgamating into central locations that are efficiently set up to deal with order flows with couriers, to deal with the orders coming in from each of the platforms, and of course, taking advantage of all working in the same space and being able to share costs, ideas, and build community. The future to us looks like this. It's centralized facilities, different food businesses working together to produce for that online food market. So what we've built here in Brisbane is exactly that. We have a facility over in Cooperoo, 29 kitchens, and what it does is it takes the key part of a restaurant, the kitchen, and it optimizes it for online delivery. So I want to just take a quick point here. I've got on the left side of the screen a typical restaurant layout, and that red shadow I've got there is the piece that engages with online food delivery. If we think about it, a normal sit-down customer coming in engages with the majority of the space outside of that. But for online food delivery, it's just the food being produced, handed to a courier, and it's off. Here's the thing. Restaurants look like the right-hand side of this slide. They're not optimized to have that handoff process if they're doing any serious volume in this market, which we've already sort of covered is growing and expanding rapidly. So we've built a facility that has 29 kitchens in this one in Cooperoo that are purely focused on producing the food. They're just that red box from the slide previous. We built up a raft of infrastructure around these kitchens, including HVAC systems and incredible sort of cooling systems, trackers and technology to make sure that we know when the food is getting ordered, when it's being cooked, when it's waiting for a courier to get it to the right courier, etc. We've on-site staff, we've got facility management. Basically, we strip away everything that a restaurant needs to do except for cook. In our facilities, the restaurant only needs to focus on cooking. And this is a representative of the space, just like that. So we provide these spaces, once again, there's 29 of them in our facility, that are ready to take almost any equipment. And our actual record at the moment, I think, is 5 weeks from first meeting to having somebody set up and cooking in our facility. That's record time to set up a restaurant, by the way. That space produces the food, and we deal with everything else. So when the hood needs cleaning, we're the ones organising it. The grease traps, pest control, the lot. We deal with everything. All the restaurant needs to focus on is cooking and nailing that food. We help them out with almost everything else. Likewise, we provide technology, advice, insights on connecting with all the different sources of demand. This could be from Uber Eats to DoorDash to lesser known platforms as well. Importantly, we've got a ton of insights from our experience working with clients to be able to share with them and help them develop their menus to be optimized, their virtual stores to be optimized, suggesting new brands, and making sure that all of this wraps in to be efficient in that kitchen space. And that's exactly what I'm talking about here. So we take that tablet nightmare of having all the different platforms, all sitting across in the computer science degree that you need to interact with each of them, and we pull them into one easy to manage location, one kitchen order flow that does not distract the people that are cooking from doing just that. Likewise, we take care of grabbing that food and ensuring it gets to the right courier at the right time and it's going to the right customer. Just to round out, what we do at Chef Collective is provide smart kitchens, and those are kitchens that are built for the online food delivery market. Our operators come in, they can set up in as little as 5 weeks. They bring in their equipment, they get started, and with our help and our guidance, they build a number of virtual brands that are serving food to extremely hungry customers in the local area. All of this is done in an incredibly flexible way. We have clients come with us for 6 months, 12, up to 3-4 years. We have a lot of people coming in for the first time. It's their first food business. We have a lot of people coming in that are established brands. Our infrastructure is set up to make sure your food is getting to the client as quickly as it possibly can, and ensuring that when somebody opens up one of those food delivery apps, you're up the top. You're the one that they're seeing first, and they're engaging with your optimized menus as best that they possibly can. Now, I'm going to leave it there. That's most of my presentation. I'm going to invite Lisa back to have a quick chat.
Thank you so much, Mark. I can't thank you enough for not only giving us and sharing the opportunity of Chef Collective, but most importantly, really giving us probably that first ground floor level of insights and expertise of how to start to optimize a digital storefront. It's quite evident before I move in is a bit of a wrap out of the content you've looked at, and obviously I'd love to ask you some key questions, is that I will invite Mark back to share some further optimization levers that can be utilised for the digital storefront. Because as I said, I'll acknowledge that we've only just had a starting point of conversation here. But look, just as listening to Mark, I've taken some key takeaways, and I just love to just really highlight some of the key sharings and insights that Mark's indicated to you today, so you can immediately start to look at what does your digital shop front look like, and if you have yet to engage in that, maybe some of the starting points of expertise that you need to either bring into your company or at least to start from. Look to enable you to have a good start point. First and foremost, like the shelf, you need to be in the top left on the digital storefront component.
That's it.
And the best way to do that, as Mark has indicated, is through promotions. Now, obviously, there's a myriad of promotions that can be in place on the digital storefront, but again, for the connectivity of the smart kitchen, one of those competitive advantages is he who is quick wins with accuracy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Also Mark's giving you some key visual indicators here. So photos are key. We've talked about that again. In the traditional sense, menus don't tend to have photos, but in the digital storefront, absolutely mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about setting expectations. So don't photograph something that is not going to obviously almost land on the doorstep in client.
Yep, exactly.
So again, looking to capture attention and looking to set expectations. Also, Mark gave some really good information around description of menu. So you talked about, short and sharp, and obviously really trying to centre that around that category. Then giving that opportunity to really start to build out that variation to basket with giving that option to add value, which is great. I'm really excited that Mark's obviously started the conversation, and it's something that we'll look to continue with Chef Collective about the virtual brand. This is a really new, exciting space. We're obviously quite familiar with private label in food and beverage products, but in that sense, a virtual brand in that respect is a way for you to add secondary or tertiary brands to your obviously cornerstone foundational offering of your restaurant. So again, what I'd like you to really underline there is that built for me. You know, Chef Collective is not looking to take you away from the key strength of your abilities in your restaurant, but to really understand how you can corner and leverage your opportunity. So it gives you the opportunity to be granular and to engage in a much deeper way with your consumer base. But we might just look at obviously the fact that we're here to obviously Mark has been here to explain the smart kitchen opportunity that is the cornerstone of the Chef Collective offering. But with that is obviously that key partnering that you take in place with your clients to make sure that they are being able to optimise their digital offering. But Mark, I have some key industry questions I'd love to ask from you.
Sure,
lots of questions that have been coming through. So if you can, we talked about scope, you know, the smart kitchen that Chef Collective and the model that you have in place for optimisation does allow for established restaurants and new start food entrepreneurs to utilise that. But would you mind just giving us a couple of best use case examples?
Yeah, sure. So there are actually a couple that are in our facility at the moment, and they've got absolutely amazing food, both on the experienced restaurant side and people that are just starting out. The most common use case we find are restaurants that already have a location. They may have been just doing dine-in, but more often than not, they've been dabbling in online food delivery. Now, that location might not be anywhere near the city. It might be in Gold Coast, for example, right? And they see us as a way to come in and engage with a whole different market that may or may not have heard of their brand before. Engage with that market in as little as 5 weeks to set up, and they've got that brand equity building. Right, so they're cooking their original menu, or they've slightly changed their menu and made it sort of an offshoot of their original menu, but they've accessed, you know, up to 100,000 in the area, new customers that before had only sort of heard of them or potentially visited them in their other location. Now, we've also got guys that are coming in for the first time. You know, they've got a great idea, you know, they're fantastic, cool, whatever it might be, and for them, it's about coming in and trying something without signing up to a 5-year lease or spending 500 grand on fitting out a full restaurant. And it's about lowering that risk of taking the plunge and starting your own business. And we love working with those guys. It's fantastic.
That's great. Thanks for that, Mark. I am going to kind of dive deep and just ask that one-on-one question. What about health and safety? It's a shared facility.
Of course. So we work very, very closely with the health authorities up here in Brisbane. It's been fantastic. It kind of comes from two parts, really. One, each of our kitchens are obviously individually operated by the people that are coming in and taking those spaces. And each of those, they require their own food licenses, they go through their own safety inspections, etc. And we work closely with the authorities to engage and organise all of that. But likewise, we've got staff on site almost all the time, actually, doing a double check, you know, going through lists and checklists to ensure that everything's cleaned, everything's put away, everything's up to code, everything's up to standard. So in a lot of ways, there are a ton more eyes sort of keeping an eye out for anything that might be a bit of a health risk. We take it very, very seriously.
Yeah, that's great to know. That's a very important question. It's really great to consider that that's all being covered off in your facility. I know that you gave the audience a really good indication of, you know, Brisbane is ripe for this opportunity, you know, from our population to our income. Can you give us an indication for what you forecast will be the benefit to our local economy now having the smart kitchen of Chef Collective in place?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a couple of ways to look at it, right? One is this is providing 29 opportunities for businesses to expand into a new location as it were, right? They're hiring new staff, they're finding new suppliers in the area, they're potentially starting off for the first time. So we estimate off that front about 60 to 70 jobs can be created just in the facility alone. In addition, there's a ton of customer choice that's going to be added in the area as you've got brands coming in and offering their current product, but also offering, you know, any crazy ideas they come up with. Right? You know, I wouldn't start a restaurant focusing on some ideas, but I definitely have it as a virtual brand to my smart kitchen, right? And so customers in the area are going to see an explosion of choice, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's great. So what I'm hearing is obviously this is going to give us our local economy the opportunity of not only job expansion, retention as well, but at the same time to really build up that vibrancy of our food offering ecosystem. That's great.
Absolutely.
So how can existing restaurants change and adapt their brand offering to Chef Collective?
Yeah, so I mean, we don't encourage anybody to throw their brand out, right? You've got an amazing brand that you've built, a menu, you know your food, and that's why you got into it in the first place, right? And you've got loyal customers. So we always encourage people we work with to stay true to themselves and to keep that brand. But we also sit down and say, imagine just limitless. You can take your brand, you can do something completely new, and you can add to it. What's the thing that if you could start again, you'd do right from the word go? You know, it might be a slightly different cuisine. It might be the same cuisine, but just modernizing it, or maybe taking it back to a traditional sense. And so for us, you know, we love speaking to operators that want to stay true to their current brand, but also have that imagination. And we love working with them to riff on that and see what they can come up with. And the reality is they can set those up, they can test them. We work with them on sort of data and analytics and understanding how it went. And they might actually spin off a whole new store.
And look, thanks for really acknowledging that, the we part of that, because, you know, while, you know, they've talked about smart kitchen and dark kitchen, we've seen obviously examples of them in global ecosystems. I think what's really incredibly unique with the Chef Collective is that partnership. As I said, it is not a cold facility, you know, it is a live partnership of, you know, where those data insights are shared. From the outset, your clients are working with you to ensure that they can see that opportunity of expansion, or if they're a new entrant, the opportunity to scale as quickly as possible. That's exactly right. Yeah, and our guys are there every day talking to the chefs. You know, we all know each other, having lunch together a lot of the time. And the point there is, you know, we're not just a landlord. We're not there to give you your keys and say good luck. We're there to help you along, be a sounding board, you know, to work through and be another set of eyes, you know, spot things we can improve or optimize on. And the point for us is, you know, we have a very select amount of people we work with. You know, we're not mass market by any means. And so we can take the time to understand and know and learn and trust each of those people that come into our building. Yeah, that's wonderful. So with that level of one-on-one type of client engagement that you have, I've got to ask the question, how do you make it so cost effective? So we spend a lot of time designing the building and planning it out. We've got an amazing construction team that spends a hell of a lot of time thinking about that. For us, we look at every line item in the P&L for a restaurant, and we say, how, by working with other people in a collective, that's where the name comes from, can we lower this line item? A perfect example is getting your hood cleaned, right? Getting your hood cleaned, you have to get a guy out, and he does your filters, and gets in your ducts and all the rest of it. We spend a ton of time designing it so that guy can come out and you can do every kitchen at once. It lowers that cost exceptionally, and it splits it between everybody, right? Grease traps to pest control to the way that any of the other operations work in the facility. Everything is with a mind to be able to share cost, bargain, and obviously negotiate on a grand scale as well, and get those line items down to leave more sort of dollars in the pocket of the operators. That's fantastic. So you're getting that opportunity of a one-on-one type of tailored partnership with Chef Collective. You've got the cost efficiencies that have been shared through, but obviously optimised through the technology and obviously the modelling that you have in place. Correct. The question I have is, you know, it seems like people can, you know, individually operate with your guidance. I always like to know, what's your opportunity for collaboration and community spirit under those operations? It's actually really cool to see. You've got chefs sort of working side by side. You've got restaurants of all different cuisines and types and experience levels in the building, and you've got everything from sort of purposeful reaching out, and we like to connect people who feel shy talking to each other, to people just bumping into each other in the break room and having a chat about, you know, hey, I got this new menu item, like, I'm gonna give it a crack, taste it, let me know what you think. And you know, we like to think of ourselves as sort of a hub for that. We like to think of ourselves as fostering that, to the point, collective, where people can work. And I would love to see restaurants teaming up and doing joint brands across different kitchens.
that's something that we're trying to cook up at the moment.
Yeah, what a great ambition. And look, I really do advocate that spirit of collaboration. Obviously, I'm very passionate to see that we obviously are stronger together, and the ability for us to align and find points of collaboration is something that's incredibly important for our ecosystem. Well, look, I'd love to keep talking with you, Mark, but we have hit our time limit. So I will, again, I'm going to put Mark on camera and I'm going to invite him back for a series where we will look to unpack with a bit more detail key areas of leverage. But importantly, please keep engaged with the standalone programs of Future Food and Brisbane Business Hub. These are our recovery and growth programs that are on offer to support local business. We wish you a wonderful afternoon and continued prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you.